Everything was fine until Amelia Hart accepted another man's hand. The Crystal Moon Ball was the crown jewel of Thornwood Kingdom's social season, a night so anticipated that guests traveled hundreds of miles just to attend. The grand ballroom shimmered beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers, each casting warm golden light across polished marble floors. Strings of white roses wrapped around silver columns, filling the air with a soft floral fragrance that mingled with vanilla pastries, fresh cider, and the faint scent of rain drifting through the open balcony doors. Outside, the full moon hung over the royal gardens like a silver lantern, bathing fountains and stone pathways in pale light. Inside, music floated through the room as violins played a graceful waltz. Laughter rose and fell. Dresses swept across the floor. Crystal glasses chimed softly together. It should have been just another royal event. Unfortunately, Alexander Thornwood noticed Amelia Hart the moment she entered the ballroom, and after that, nothing else seemed nearly as important. The Alpha King stood with a group of governors discussing trade routes and harvest forecasts. At least that was where his body was. His attention had already wandered. Across the room, Amelia paused near the entrance when an elderly guest struggled with a dropped shawl. Without hesitation, she stepped forward to help. The older woman's grateful smile appeared almost instantly. A few moments later, Amelia was laughing with her as though they had known each other for years. Alexander watched the exchange from across the ballroom. His wolf immediately seemed pleased. There she is. Alexander silently ignored the comment. His wolf tried again. The nicest person in the room. Still ignoring me, I see. Alexander took a sip of cider and pretended to listen to a discussion about wheat production. Unfortunately, his wolf was proving difficult tonight. Amelia moved through the ballroom greeting guests, remembering names, asking questions, making people smile. A nervous young servant nearly collided with a table while carrying drinks, and Amelia gently steadied the tray before disaster struck. The servant's relief was obvious. Even from 30 feet away, Alexander could hear it in his voice when he thanked her. Wolves notice things, especially alpha wolves, especially when Amelia Hart was involved. Beneath the scent of roses and expensive perfume, Alexander caught her familiar fragrance. Jasmine, wild honey, fresh spring air. Somehow, even in a crowded ballroom, his senses always found her. His wolf sounded entirely too proud of this achievement. We could identify her in a football stadium. That is not something to brag about. It absolutely is. Alexander looked away before anyone noticed he was smiling. That was another unfortunate side effect of Amelia's presence. She made the most feared ruler in the kingdom smile at inappropriate moments. Then the orchestra shifted into a new melody. A waltz. Across the ballroom, a young nobleman approached Amelia. Alexander recognized him immediately. Nathan Calloway, senator's son. Well-respected, polite, educated, good reputation, completely reasonable. His wolf disliked him on sight. Nathan bowed. Amelia smiled. They exchanged a few words Alexander couldn't hear over the music. Then Nathan extended his hand. For one brief second, Amelia hesitated. Then she accepted. The ballroom suddenly felt much quieter. Alexander stared. Not obviously. Years of royal training prevented that. But internally, things became complicated. Amelia stepped onto the dance floor. The pale blue fabric of her gown caught the chandelier light as she moved. Nathan guided her into the first turn of the waltz. She laughed at something he said. Alexander heard it instantly. Out of hundreds of conversations, dozens of instruments, and a ballroom filled with guests, he heard only her laughter. His wolf sat upright. Excuse me. Alexander already knew where this was going. She is dancing. Yes, with him. It is a ballroom. People dance. His wolf considered that for exactly 3 seconds. I still don't like it. To Alexander's horror, he realized he agreed. Amelia spun gracefully beneath the golden lights. She looked happy. Genuinely happy. The realization should have pleased him. Instead, something unfamiliar tightened inside his chest. His wolf finally sighed. Well, this explains. A lot. Explains what? We're in love with her. Alexander nearly answered out loud. Across the ballroom, Nathan smiled and appeared to ask Amelia another question. Her eyes brightened. Then she laughed again and nodded. Nathan extended his hand once more. A second dance. Alexander remained perfectly still. Calm. Controlled. Regal. Unfortunately, deep inside, his wolf had just stopped watching the dance and started planning how to interrupt it. Alexander Thornwood remained perfectly calm. At least, that was the image he presented to the kingdom. Inside his head, His wolf was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. The second dance had begun. Violins floated through the ballroom beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. Golden light reflected across polished marble floors while elegant couples moved through practiced turns and graceful steps. A cool spring breeze drifted through the open balcony doors, carrying the scent of fresh rain from the palace gardens. Roses perfumed the air. Crystal glasses chimed softly. Laughter rose and fell around the room. Somewhere within all of it, Alexander could hear Amelia Hart laughing. Only Amelia. His wolf immediately reacted. There it is again. Alexander took a slow sip of cider. It is a laugh. It is her laugh. Across the ballroom, Amelia and Nathan Calloway continued their dance. Nathan appeared to be telling a story. Amelia smiled politely, then laughed. Not the careful laugh people used in formal gatherings. A genuine one. Warm. Bright. The kind that reached her eyes. Alexander felt something tighten in his chest. His wolf sounded offended on a personal level. Why is he making her laugh? Alexander stared at his drink. Because he is speaking to her. We should have thought of that. The realization seemed to genuinely upset his wolf. Nearby, Lord Benjamin Hawthorne watched the exchange unfold with growing amusement. The elderly advisor had survived decades of politics. He had negotiated treaties, prevented scandals, and guided kings through crises. Yet nothing in his long career had prepared him for watching Alexander Thornwood become distracted by a woman on a dance floor. Benjamin followed the king's gaze and smiled into his glass. A fascinating evening, Your Majesty. Alexander immediately became suspicious. Why? No reason. Benjamin's smile widened. I simply enjoy observing history. Meanwhile, Amelia remained entirely unaware of the royal emergency developing around her. During the dance, she noticed one of the musicians struggling to keep loose sheet music from sliding off a nearby stand. As the dancers passed, she quietly reached out, caught the papers before they fell, and returned them with an apologetic smile. The relieved musician mouthed a thank you. Amelia simply nodded and continued dancing. Alexander noticed. Of course he noticed. His wolf noticed too. See, that is exactly what I am talking about. Alexander knew what it meant. Amelia had a habit of paying attention to people others overlooked. It was one of the first things he had admired about her. She made strangers feel important. She made nervous people relax. She somehow made crowded rooms feel warmer simply by being in them. Across the ballroom, moonlight spilling through the tall windows caught her honey blonde hair and turned the strands almost silver for a moment. Alexander looked away far too late. His wolf was delighted. Oh, we are in trouble. We have been in trouble for months. Another turn carried Amelia closer to the edge of the dance floor. For a brief moment, her scent drifted through the crowd. Jasmine, wild honey, spring air. Alexander did not need to look to know exactly where she was. He always knew. Wolves were good at tracking. His wolf seemed very proud of this fact. We could find her in a football stadium. That is not helpful. It is impressive. Two palace guards standing nearby exchanged glances. Has His Majesty moved? One whispered. Not really. Has he looked anywhere else? I do not think so. Alexander heard every word. Unfortunately, his wolf found this hilarious. We are becoming obvious. Wonderful. The orchestra gradually softened as the second dance neared its end. Alexander finally released a breath. Good. The dance was almost over. His wolf relaxed slightly. Then Nathan bowed. Amelia smiled. They exchanged a few words. Nathan extended his hand again. A third dance. Everything inside Alexander went completely still. His wolf stopped talking. The music faded. Guests applauded politely. Somewhere outside, rain began tapping softly against the palace windows. For 3 full seconds, there was silence inside his head. Then his wolf spoke with terrifying clarity. Absolutely not. Across the ballroom, Amelia hesitated. Just briefly. Her eyes shifted toward the crowd, toward the royal table, toward him. Alexander's heartbeat stumbled once. Then she smiled. The orchestra lifted their instruments for the next song. Nathan waited hopefully. Benjamin slowly lowered his glass. Your Majesty? Alexander set down his untouched drink, straightened his jacket, and for the first time that evening, stepped toward the dance floor. The moment Alexander Thornwood stepped toward the dance floor, something changed. Not in the ballroom, not in the music, in him. The orchestra lifted into the opening notes of the next waltz while guests drifted back into position beneath the golden glow of the chandeliers. Rain tapped softly against the tall palace windows. Candlelight shimmered across crystal glasses and polished marble. The scent of roses lingered in the warm air. Yet none of it seemed quite as important as the sight of Amelia Hart standing a few yards away. Nathan Calloway still waited patiently with his hand extended. Amelia smiled apologetically, appearing uncertain. Then her gaze lifted, directly toward Alexander. For one brief moment, the noise of the ballroom faded. Her pale blue eyes widened slightly when she noticed him approaching. Alexander felt his heartbeat stumble. His wolf immediately became impossible. She looked at us. I noticed. She really looked at us. Alexander continued walking. His expression remained calm. His wolf, unfortunately, sounded ready to celebrate a national holiday. Across the room, Benjamin Hawthorne quietly turned away to hide a smile. Several palace guards exchanged knowing glances. The king was finally moving. History, apparently, was proceeding exactly as expected. Amelia watched Alexander approach. Something felt different tonight. She had known the Alpha King for months. He was always composed, always confident, always impossible to read. Yet as he crossed the ballroom, she found herself noticing details she had somehow missed before. The silver-gray eyes, the quiet strength in his posture, the way people instinctively stepped aside without being asked. Most surprising of all was the expression in his eyes. Warm, focused, entirely fixed on her. A strange flutter stirred in her chest. Nathan noticed Alexander's approach and immediately bowed. Your Majesty. Alexander returned the greeting politely. Lord Calloway. Nathan smiled. I hope I have not monopolized Miss Hart's evening. Alexander's wolf answered instantly. Yes. Alexander ignored it. Not at all, he said smoothly. Nathan seemed relieved. Amelia tried very hard not to laugh. For some reason, she suddenly suspected that was not entirely true. Rain continued pattering softly against the windows. Somewhere beyond the glass, thunder rumbled far in the distance. Inside the ballroom, the orchestra waited for the dancers to pair together. Alexander glanced toward Amelia. Have you enjoyed the ball? Amelia smiled. Very much. Good. He paused. I was beginning to think I might miss the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Amelia blinked. The answer surprised her. So did the small hint of nervousness she thought she heard beneath his calm voice. Surely she imagined it. Alpha Kings did not get nervous. His wolf nearly laughed. That is adorable. We are absolutely nervous. Nathan glanced between them. Slowly, carefully. Then a look of understanding crossed his face. To his credit, he handled the discovery with remarkable grace. Miss Hart, he said, stepping back slightly. I believe someone else may wish to claim this dance. Amelia looked from Nathan to Alexander. The realization arrived all at once. Warmth touched her cheeks. Alexander suddenly found himself unable to remember several important diplomatic discussions from earlier that evening. His wolf was extremely unhelpful. Say yes. We are standing here in front of an entire ballroom. Say yes. Amelia lowered her eyes for a moment before looking back at Alexander. The orchestra's music floated softly around them. Moonlight shimmered through the windows behind her. Jasmine and honey drifted through the air. Then she smiled. I would love to dance with you. For the first time all evening, Alexander's wolf became completely silent. Not because it had calmed down, because it had finally gotten exactly what it wanted. The moment Amelia Hart placed her hand in Alexander Thornwood's, the entire evening seemed to shift. The orchestra began the next waltz as soft violin notes floated beneath the crystal chandeliers. Golden light spilled across the ballroom, reflecting from polished marble and sparkling glass. Outside, rain continued tapping gently against the tall windows while moonlight silvered the palace gardens beyond. The scent of roses drifted through the warm air, mingling with fresh rain and candle wax. Yet for Alexander, everything faded into the background the instant Amelia smiled up at him. His wolf, which had spent the last hour complaining about nearly everything, suddenly became suspiciously quiet. Alexander noticed immediately. That was unusual. Are you all right? His wolf sounded deeply content. I am wonderful. Alexander almost laughed. Together, they stepped onto the dance floor. Amelia felt surprisingly nervous. That alone was unusual. She attended royal events regularly. She spoke with nobles, governors, and diplomats without difficulty. Dancing should have been easy. Yet somehow, standing beside Alexander made her aware of everything. The warmth of his hand, the steady confidence in his posture, the faint scent of cedarwood and rain that seemed uniquely his. She glanced up and found him watching her. Not in the distant way rulers often observe people. He was actually paying attention. The realization sent another flutter through her chest. The music carried them into the first turn. Alexander guided her effortlessly through the dance. Neither spoke for a moment. Around them, couples moved gracefully across the ballroom. Dresses swept softly over marble. Crystal glasses chimed in the distance. Laughter rose from nearby tables. Yet an unexpected sense of calm settled over both of them. His wolf sighed happily. There she is. Alexander did not argue. Amelia smiled. You seem unusually quiet. Tonight. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Compared to what? Compared to every other conversation we have ever had. A laugh escaped him before he could stop it. Amelia looked genuinely delighted by the sound. There it is, she said. I was beginning to think kings forgot how to laugh. Alexander shook his head. Only during budget meetings. Amelia laughed. The sound immediately improved his evening. His wolf agreed. Dramatically. We should make her laugh more often. That seems reasonable. They continued dancing as the orchestra swelled around them. For the first time all evening, Alexander stopped paying attention to who was watching. He stopped noticing political allies. He stopped noticing neighboring rulers. He even stopped noticing Nathan Calloway entirely. The only thing that seemed to matter was Amelia. How easily she smiled. How naturally she moved through the music. How every conversation with her somehow felt different from every conversation with anyone else. Amelia found herself noticing things too. Alexander was not intimidating when he smiled. He was not distant when he listened. Every time she spoke, he seemed genuinely interested in the answer. Most people listened because he was king. Alexander listened because he cared. The distinction felt important. Near the edge of the ballroom, Benjamin Hawthorne observed the pair and quietly accepted defeat. Well, he murmured to himself, that answers that question. Nobody nearby knew what question he meant. Benjamin was fairly certain Alexander did not know either. The dance continued beneath the golden lights. Outside, rain softened to a gentle mist. Moonlight filtered through the clouds and painted silver patterns across the windows. For a brief moment, Amelia looked toward the glass. It is beautiful tonight. Alexander followed her gaze. Then he looked back at her. Yes, he said quietly. Amelia's cheeks warmed. She was suddenly not entirely sure he was talking about the weather. Neither was he. The music gradually slowed. The final notes drifted through the ballroom like a fading dream. Around them, couples began to separate. Yet neither Alexander nor Amelia moved immediately. For one lingering moment, they simply stood there beneath the chandeliers, looking at each other while the rest of the ballroom disappeared. And for the first time that evening, both of them realized the dance had ended far too soon. Alexander Thornwood had attended hundreds of royal balls throughout his life. He had danced with duchesses, princesses, diplomats, and visiting nobles from every corner of the continent. Yet as the final notes of the waltz faded and Amelia Hart smiled up at him, he realized something deeply inconvenient. He could not remember a single one of those dances. The ballroom slowly returned to life around them. Conversations resumed. Musicians adjusted their instruments. Servants moved between tables carrying trays of sparkling cider and desserts. Outside, the rain had softened into a fine silver mist that blurred the palace gardens beyond the windows. Moonlight filtered through the clouds and painted pale reflections across the marble floor. Yet Alexander remained standing beside Amelia, neither of them quite ready to step away. His wolf seemed unusually thoughtful. That was new. Alexander immediately became suspicious. What are you thinking about? His wolf took a moment before answering. We should probably admit this is serious. Alexander stared at him internally. Serious? We spent an hour staring at her across a ballroom. We forgot 3 conversations, 2 governors, and most of a trade meeting. Fair point. His wolf sounded almost offended. We are the Alpha King. This should not be happening. Amelia glanced toward the musicians as they prepared another song. A small smile lingered on her face. Thank you for the dance. Alexander looked at her. I should be thanking you. The answer arrived so naturally that it surprised both of them. Amelia laughed softly. There was that sound again. Warm, bright, familiar. His wolf immediately forgot its serious conversation. There it is. Alexander almost smiled. Amelia noticed anyway. You are smiling more tonight. Alexander raised an eyebrow. Am I? Definitely. She tilted her head slightly. I like it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Something shifted in Alexander's chest. Not because of the compliment itself, because she meant it. Amelia had never offered empty praise. Every word she spoke carried sincerity. That was one of the reasons people trusted her so easily. It was also becoming one of Alexander's favorite things about her. Nearby, Benjamin Hawthorne watched from a safe distance. He had now reached the point where helping was unnecessary. The situation was progressing perfectly on its own. Amelia accepted a glass of cider from a passing servant and thanked him by name. The servant looked genuinely pleased that she remembered. Alexander noticed that too. Of course he did. He noticed everything about her. The realization struck without warning. It was not dramatic. There was no lightning, no grand revelation, just a simple truth arriving quietly. He liked watching her smile. He liked hearing her laugh. He liked how she treated people. He liked how every room seemed brighter when she entered it. Most importantly, he wanted to be the reason she smiled. His wolf became very still. Alexander slowly looked toward the ballroom windows where moonlight shimmered against the rain-speckled glass. This was no longer admiration. It was no longer curiosity. It was certainly no longer simple attraction. Somewhere along the way, Amelia Hart had become important. Very important. The kind of important that changed things. The kind of important that made future plans suddenly include another person. His wolf finally spoke. There it is. Alexander knew exactly what it meant. Across the ballroom, a group of musicians began a softer melody. Guests drifted back toward the dance floor. Amelia looked toward the music before returning her attention to him. "Will you be staying for the rest of the evening?" she asked. Alexander had planned to leave early. There were reports waiting in his office. Meetings tomorrow morning. Responsibilities that normally mattered. Looking at Amelia, he found himself reconsidering all of them. "I think I will." Her smile returned instantly. Somehow, that felt like a reward. A few feet away, Benjamin quietly muttered, completely doomed. Neither of them heard him. Alexander was too busy watching Amelia. Amelia was too busy smiling at Alexander. And for the first time in his life, the Alpha King realized he did not want Amelia Hart to choose a king. He wanted her to choose him. For the first time all evening, Alexander Thornwood stopped worrying about what came next. The realization should have unsettled him. Instead, it felt strangely peaceful. The ballroom continued to glow beneath hundreds of crystal chandeliers, while soft music drifted through the air. Guests mingled between tables decorated with white roses and silver candle holders. Beyond the towering windows, the rain had faded completely, leaving the palace gardens washed in silver moonlight. Tiny droplets still clung to the glass, catching reflections from the ballroom like scattered stars. Amelia Hart stood beside him holding her glass of cider, and somehow that felt more important than everything else happening around them. His wolf seemed unusually quiet again. Alexander had learned that silence was dangerous. What now? His wolf considered the question carefully. Nothing. Nothing. We stay here. We look at her. We remain happy. Alexander almost laughed. That was the simplest plan his wolf had ever suggested. Amelia glanced toward the moonlit windows. "Would you like some fresh air?" The question surprised him. Not because he disliked the idea. Quite the opposite. "I would." Together they stepped away from the ballroom and toward one of the palace balconies. The sounds of the celebration softened behind them as they moved through open glass doors. Cool night air greeted them immediately. The scent of rain lingered among the climbing roses that wrapped around the stone railings. Moonlight stretched across the gardens below, illuminating fountains, winding pathways, and rows of flowering hedges. Somewhere in the distance, water trickled softly through a marble fountain. The world felt quieter out here. Smaller. Amelia rested her hands lightly against the balcony railing and looked toward the gardens. For several moments neither of them spoke. Yet the silence felt comfortable. Easy. Alexander found himself appreciating that. Most conversations in his life required something from him. Decisions. Leadership. Responsibility. Amelia never seemed to want anything except honesty. "You look different tonight," she said eventually. Alexander turned toward her. "Different how?" She smiled slightly. "Less like a king." His eyebrow lifted. "I'm not sure whether that is a compliment." "It is." Her eyes sparkled with amusement. "You seem happier." Alexander stared at her for a moment. The honest answer arrived before he could stop it. "I am." Amelia's smile softened. Something warm settled in her chest. The answer felt important. More important than it probably should have. She looked away toward the gardens, suddenly aware of how easily he had said it. Around them, moonlight silvered the edges of the roses climbing the balcony walls. A gentle breeze stirred several loose strands of her honey-blonde hair. Alexander noticed immediately. Of course he did. His wolf noticed too. "We like this." Alexander did not argue. The truth was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. Amelia glanced back toward him. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." The answer came so quickly that both of them blinked. Amelia laughed softly. Alexander looked momentarily embarrassed. His wolf was delighted. "Smooth." Very smooth. I was going to ask, Amelia said, still smiling, why you spent most of the evening watching me. Alexander froze. Internally, his wolf stopped functioning. Completely. For several seconds there was nothing. No thoughts. No advice. No helpful commentary. Just silence. Amelia immediately looked concerned. You do not have to answer that. No, Alexander said quietly. I probably do. His heartbeat felt unusually loud. Somewhere behind them, music drifted from the ballroom. Somewhere below, water continued flowing through the gardens. The scent of jasmine reached him on the night breeze. Amelia waited patiently, not demanding, not pushing, simply waiting. Alexander looked at her beneath the silver glow of the moonlight and realized there was no answer. He wanted to give more, and no answer. He feared more at the same time. His wolf finally found its voice. Well, this should be interesting. Alexander Thornwood looked at Amelia Hart beneath the silver glow of the moonlight and realized there had never been a more dangerous question. Not because the answer was complicated, because it was painfully simple. The night breeze carried the scent of rain-soaked roses through the balcony, while distant music drifted from the ballroom behind them. Soft laughter occasionally echoed through the open doors. Somewhere below, water flowed gently through the palace fountains. Yet the entire world seemed to narrow until only Amelia remained. She waited patiently beside the stone railing, her pale blue eyes fixed on him. There was no pressure in her expression, no expectation, just quiet curiosity. Somehow that made it harder. His wolf sounded unusually serious. We should tell her the truth. Alexander exhaled slowly. For once, he agreed. Amelia tilted her head slightly. You do not have to answer. I know. His voice came out softer than intended. Moonlight caught the golden strands of her hair as a gentle breeze stirred them across her shoulder. For a brief moment Alexander simply looked at her. Then he smiled faintly. The problem is that I want to answer. Amelia felt her heartbeat quicken. Alexander rested one hand against the stone railing and looked out toward the gardens. The words came easier when he was not looking directly at her. At first, I told myself I was simply paying attention. Amelia listened quietly. You help people when nobody is watching. You remember names. You notice things other people miss. A small smile touched her lips. That sounds suspiciously like a compliment. It is. The answer arrived immediately. Amelia laughed softly. Alexander shook his head. You see? That. What? You do that. She looked genuinely confused. His wolf seemed equally fascinated by this. You make people feel better without even realizing it. Amelia stared at him for a moment. Nobody had ever described her that way before. Alexander continued before he could lose his courage. At first I thought I admired you. His gaze shifted toward the moonlit gardens. Then I thought perhaps I simply enjoyed your company. The night breeze carried the familiar scent of jasmine and honey toward him. His wolf became very still. Amelia noticed the change in his expression. The honesty there surprised her. It was not the face of a king addressing a subject. It was simply Alexander. But tonight, he admitted quietly, I realized neither of those explanations was enough. For several seconds, the only sounds came from the distant orchestra and the fountain below. Amelia's heart was beating much faster now. She was fairly certain he could hear it. Somehow that thought only made her more nervous. Alexander finally looked directly at her. Silver moonlight reflected in his eyes. When you were dancing with Nathan, I could not stop watching. Amelia immediately felt warmth rise to her cheeks. His wolf sighed dramatically. Excellent opening. Very smooth. Alexander ignored him. Mostly. And the strange part was not that I was jealous. Amelia blinked. Jealous? The strange part was realizing why. The world seemed unusually quiet. Alexander smiled faintly. Every conversation tonight felt less important than talking to you. Amelia forgot how to breathe for a second. Every dance seemed less interesting than the one we shared. The warmth in her chest expanded until she could barely think. Alexander's voice remained calm, but she could hear the sincerity beneath every word. When I walk into a room, I look for you. His wolf nodded approvingly. Facts. When something good happens, I want to tell you. More facts. And when you smile. He paused briefly. The entire day becomes easier. Amelia looked away for a moment because meeting his eyes had suddenly become impossible. Nobody had ever spoken to her like this before. Not because the words were extravagant, because they felt true. Alexander stepped slightly closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough that she no longer felt alone on the balcony. You asked why I spent the evening watching you. Amelia slowly lifted her gaze. The music from the ballroom faded into the background once again. The scent of roses lingered between them. Moonlight painted silver across the stone floor. Alexander smiled, and this time there was no hesitation at all. Because somewhere along the way, Amelia Hart became my favorite part of every room she walks into. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Amelia smiled. And for the first time all evening, Alexander realized she was looking at him the same way he had been looking at her. For a moment, Amelia Hart forgot about the ballroom, the music, and the hundreds of guests gathered only a few yards away. Alexander Thornwood's words lingered between them like the final notes of a song that refused to fade. The night air felt cooler now, carrying the scent of roses, rain-soaked stone, and distant jasmine through the moonlit balcony. Somewhere below, water continued flowing through the palace fountains. Somewhere behind them, laughter drifted from the celebration. Yet none of it seemed important. Not compared to the look in Alexander's eyes. Not compared to the honesty she had just heard. Amelia lowered her gaze for a moment, trying to steady the sudden rush of emotions filling her chest. No one had ever spoken to her that way before. Not because the words had been grand. They had not. They had been simple, honest, real. Somehow that made them infinitely more powerful. Alexander remained where he was. He did not move closer. He did not ask for an answer. He simply waited. His wolf sat quietly beside him. For once, neither of them wanted to rush anything. Amelia deserved time. Amelia deserved a choice. The realization made his wolf strangely proud. We are learning. Alexander almost smiled. Amelia looked out toward the moonlit gardens below. As she did, memories began surfacing one after another. Small moments. Ordinary moments. Moments she had never examined closely before. The time Alexander had spent nearly 20 minutes helping a frightened palace puppy during a thunderstorm because she had asked him to. The afternoon he had canceled part of an official meeting to visit a village recovering from flood damage because she told him the families needed reassurance. The countless conversations where he had listened more than he spoke. The way he always remembered things she mentioned in passing. Her favorite flowers. Her favorite tea. The names of people she cared about. Amelia slowly realized something that made her heart skip. She remembered those moments because they had mattered to her too. The thought settled gently into place. Suddenly she understood why she always looked for him during palace events. Why his presence made crowded rooms feel safer. Why she felt disappointed whenever he left a conversation too soon. Why tonight had felt different from the moment he stepped onto the dance floor. Alexander had not been the only one paying attention. She had been watching him too. Amelia laughed softly under her breath. Alexander immediately looked concerned. Was that a good laugh or a bad laugh? She blinked, then laughed again. A good one. Relief crossed his face so quickly that she almost laughed a third time. His wolf sounded deeply offended. We are supposed to be mysterious. We stopped being mysterious 3 dances ago. Fair. Amelia shook her head, smiling. You know what is strange? Alexander waited. I spent months telling myself you were intimidating. His eyebrow lifted. Months. Months. That seems excessive. Amelia laughed again. And then tonight happened. The moonlight caught the warmth in her eyes as she looked at him. Now I think you are just a man who cares too much. Alexander opened his mouth to defend himself, then stopped. Because unfortunately she was correct. His wolf found this hilarious. Completely accurate. Amelia stepped a little closer. Not because she had planned to. Because it felt natural. Comfortable. Right. The breeze stirred softly around them. Somewhere in the distance, the orchestra began another melody. When you said you look for me in every room, she said quietly, I understood exactly what you meant. Alexander forgot how to breathe for a second. His wolf stopped functioning again. Amelia smiled at the reaction. Because I do the same thing. Silence followed. Warm. Gentle. Perfect. Alexander stared at her as though he was trying to make sure he had heard correctly. You do? Amelia nodded. Every time. The confession felt surprisingly easy now. When something good happens, I want to tell you too. Alexander's heartbeat became noticeably less cooperative. His wolf looked ready to throw a celebration. Amelia continued before she lost her courage. And when you leave a room, she smiled softly. It always feels a little emptier afterward. For several seconds neither of them spoke. They simply stood there beneath the moonlight while the distant music drifted through the night air. The scent of roses surrounded them. Silver light reflected in Amelia's eyes. Alexander realized he had never seen anything more beautiful. Amelia reached for his hand. Not because she was nervous. Not because she needed reassurance. Because she wanted to. Their fingers intertwined naturally. Effortlessly. The choice felt simple. Clear. Certain. Amelia looked up at him and smiled. I think somewhere along the way, Alexander Thornwood became my favorite part of every room too. His wolf immediately gave up any remaining attempt at dignity. We won. Alexander laughed. Amelia laughed with him. And standing beneath the moonlit sky, neither of them cared about titles, crowns, or expectations. For the first time that evening, there was only Alexander, only Amelia, and the quiet certainty that they had finally found exactly what they had been looking for. Neither Alexander Thornwood nor Amelia Hart noticed how much time had passed on the balcony. The music from the ballroom continued drifting through the open doors while moonlight painted silver across the palace gardens below. The world felt quieter now, simpler. For the first time all evening, there were no unanswered questions between them. Amelia's hand remained in his. Alexander had faced difficult negotiations, royal crises, and countless responsibilities throughout his life. Somehow none of them had ever made him feel as nervous as holding her hand. His wolf, on the other hand, had become completely insufferable. We won. Alexander ignored him. We absolutely won. Still ignoring you. We should tell everyone. Absolutely not. His wolf appeared deeply disappointed. Amelia noticed the small smile tugging at the corner of Alexander's mouth. What is so funny? Alexander hesitated. You do not want the honest answer. I probably do. He sighed. My wolf is celebrating. Amelia laughed so suddenly that she nearly dropped her glass of cider. Celebrating? Apparently. Why? Alexander looked at her. The answer was obvious. Amelia's smile immediately returned. That seems fair. Together they finally stepped back inside the ballroom. The moment they entered, several people noticed. Benjamin Hawthorne noticed first. Naturally, the elderly advisor took one look at their joined hands and slowly closed his eyes. Finally, he muttered. Nearby, two palace guards exchanged victorious expressions. One discreetly handed the other a folded dollar bill. Alexander decided he did not want to know what that meant. Nathan Calloway spotted them next. To his credit, he simply smiled and raised his glass in greeting. Amelia returned the gesture warmly. There was no bitterness, no resentment, only the easy goodwill of someone who genuinely wished them happiness. The ballroom felt different now, warmer somehow. The orchestra began another lively tune while guests returned to dancing beneath the chandeliers. Candlelight glowed against polished marble. The scent of roses lingered in the air. Outside, the clouds had completely cleared, revealing a sky filled with stars. Amelia looked around the room before turning back to Alexander. Do you realize everyone is staring? Alexander followed her gaze. Unfortunately, she was correct. Half the ballroom appeared fascinated. The other half was pretending not to be. His wolf sounded proud. We are very popular. I am beginning to regret being king, Alexander said. Amelia laughed. Just now. This specific moment, yes. Benjamin approached carrying a glass of cider. Your Majesty. Alexander narrowed his eyes. Benjamin smiled. Miss Hart. Amelia smiled politely. Lord Hawthorne. Benjamin looked at their joined hands. Then at Alexander. Then back at Amelia. I simply wanted to congratulate both of you. Alexander immediately became suspicious. For what? Benjamin appeared delighted by the question. For finally catching up with the rest of the kingdom. Amelia nearly laughed again. Alexander sighed. His wolf thought Benjamin was hilarious. The evening continued beneath the golden lights and music. No grand announcements were made. No dramatic speeches were needed. They spent the remainder of the ball exactly the way they wanted to. Talking, laughing, dancing, enjoying the simple happiness of being together. Hours later, as the celebration drew to a close, Alexander and Amelia stepped outside one final time. The palace gardens stretched before them beneath the moonlight. A cool breeze stirred the roses. Fountains whispered softly in the distance. Stars glittered overhead. Amelia rested her head lightly against his shoulder. Alexander wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Neither felt the need to say much. The silence was comfortable, peaceful. Home. His wolf finally settled down for the first time all evening. We won, it said softly. Alexander smiled. This time, he agreed. Amelia looked up at him. What are you thinking about? Alexander glanced toward the moonlit gardens, then back at her. Honestly, he smiled. I am thinking that this turned out to be a very good night. Amelia laughed and slipped her hand into his. Together they stood beneath the stars while warm light spilled from the palace windows behind them. Somewhere in the distance, music faded into the night. Somewhere beyond the gardens, wolves sang beneath the moon. And for the first time in a very long while, both Alexander Thornwood and Amelia Hart knew exactly where they belonged.